Hi, this is Latoya Stackhouse Marshall, and this is my response to Learning Module 6 on Budgeting Part 2. I just want to jump in and get started with the first part about the statement about budget and financial officers and how during this time of ambiguity and uncertainty, how they're wrestling with the problem of creating their budget and maintaining a balanced budget. One of the things that I think that budget managers are having to deal with is the fact, first of all, that state appropriations are being cut. And with state appropriations being cut, then tuition is being raised, and that amount is determined by whatever governing body the institution falls up under. I think that when it comes to managing, they having to know how much restricted and unrestricted funds that the institution is going to receive year in and year out is always going to fluctuate. I think back to right now what we're facing with the FSLA law that is asking for a lot of the people that work in institutions for them to go from a $23,000 qualification to be exempt to a $46,000 exemption mark is having a huge burden on some institutions because they're not able to now pay salaries for their staff and their faculty, and now they're having to pay even more because of this new law. Things like that happen throughout the year can become a very burdensome problem for someone that is dealing with the budget. Um, I also look at the fact that state appropriations are being cut year after year, so tuition is being raised year after year, and even though tuition is being raised, we don't know whether or not we're going to have an influx of students or not. So that can also be a headache, a heartache for an institution, and things that need to be considered. What if there are a lot of capital structures that need to go up on the campus, if you need to make corrections like on our campus where we have a lot of older buildings, and a lot of those buildings have to be renovated and also have to have special construction done in order for to have accessibility for our students that may have disabilities. So that is another expenditure that the institution must take, and I think they should take in order to accommodate all students. This is another thing that budget managers are having to face during this time. So I just think that there are a lot of things that's not black or white when it comes to the budget. There are a lot of gray areas that budget managers are having to deal with right now during this process. So when I looked in the reading and the other two additional items that were being covered that I really found interesting, I wanted to move over to the Columbia University budgeting process. And one of the things that I was really caught by was when they started talking about why why there should be any care put into the order of the budgeting process. And they started to break down how you must first start looking at your restricted funds because that money is allocated to do certain things for certain projects and federal and non-federal grants and how they're donated. And sometimes even with your donors sometimes allocate money to certain areas that they feel that are of interest. So you have to look at how that money is allocated first before you can even get to your unrestricted funds. Um, and so then they start talking about how the unrestricted funds can be used for any purpose in a department, but they must follow university guidelines and also follow the mission of the university. Um, Sometimes people think that just because you have money, you should be able to spend it, but there is an order for a reason, and because this university has set up why they should care about the order, then that makes it a little bit easier for people to understand why certain processes are in place. Another thing I wanted to look at out of chapter 5 in the budgets and financial management book, I want to talk about some of the common issues. And one of the things I want to touch on is how circumstances and events have influenced the budget that was originally planned. And just looking at the different common issues, there were a few notes that I took. Looking at the quote on page 141, it says that most academic, business, and student affair administrators understand that learning about their unit is extremely important, but understanding the internal procedures, decision making structures, and the way businesses have been done in the past within the unit is the first step towards success. And it goes on to say that, however, paying attention only to the unit can become a trap. And I think that this is one of the biggest issues that can occur in higher education institutions, because we're only worried about what's going on in our own little world. We must understand that when we're looking at the common issues, I kind of went through each point and wrote down a point of my own. The first thing for points 1 and 2 is that every institution is different with their own set of priorities and objectives, and that budget managers are forced to assess the institution to learn the environment. Even though student success may have their own things that they want to do, and academic affairs may have their own things they must have to do, it is the budget manager's job to prioritize those things and pick out what is actually important. Um, just looking at the numbers will not work, because there's so much that needs to be uncovered as to when a budget manager first come on. It might be a unit that's operating in the red, but it's more than just operating in the red. We have to figure out the whys and how we got there. That all of that assessment will help in the long run in the future. Point 3, making sure that you have the proper team to accomplish the task. Not everybody's going to be on board with change, but if the institution is going down the wrong direction, it is the budget manager's job to turn all of that around and get everybody on the page. And if they're not going to be on the page, they can't be on the team. And point 4, many times it is the process that needs to be assessed, because in some institutions you may have had a lot of turnover at that point. Different budget managers each year, every 2 years. So, and nobody ever got down the proper process that works for their institution, going back to point number 1, that each institution is different. And just because it worked at institution ABC doesn't mean it's going to work at institution XYZ. So these are my points that I wanted to make on Learning Module 6. I hope you enjoyed this presentation.